Well, hello, welcome to another video. I'm very excited about this video because when I did my Beatles location videos way back when, 2 years now, Strawberry Fields at Knoll Park, it was all about getting out and finding the locations relating to Beatles. And then my mind has been kind of focused on doing the documentary type things with all the information, right or wrong. Lots of people giving me all the corrections. Oh, Tudor, you've said something wrong. But that's fine, because that's what the channel's about, isn't it? It's a community. Everyone's in it together. And as you can see, we're in London. I'm kind of doing a driving sightseeing tour. But here we go, over Tower Bridge. Lovely. I just don't want to do the tube for this trip. I've got 7 locations to do. You know by the thumbnail what it is. It's a Beatles Mad Day Out, and it was a very fabulous day on July the 28th, 1968. It was kind of a critical point in the Beatles' career because they were filming the White Album. They were recording the White Album, and the tensions were rife. So the idea was to get out and just get away from the studio and all the conflicts and the tension. Now, I'd always thought it was McCartney's idea. I don't know what this cop was doing. I think I'll do a U-E. Oh. Did a U-E and a bike crashed into him. I've got it on camera. I suppose that matters, does it? What is the guy doing?
He blew his mind out in a car.
He's decided not to do a U-E. 1968, 28th of July, the Beatles were in the middle of recording the White Album and tensions were rife. So they decided to get out and do a photo shoot. Now, I'd always thought it was McCartney's idea because he was always involved in kind of the album covers, photo shoots, that kind of thing. But digging a little deeper, it turns out that Tony Barrow had quite a big hand in it as well. And I can imagine McCartney calling him up, and saying, hello Tony, it's Paul here. I've got an idea for a photo shoot. Can you get a photographer? Do you like my Liverpool accent? Scouser. So Tony Barrow organised the photo shoot with Don McCullin and also Mal Evans as a kind of driver, and there was 2 cars and a van full of gear. And they went to 7 locations. So that's kind of what I want to do in this video. There's going to be changes. A lot of the buildings actually don't stand anymore. Well, certainly not Old Street Tube Station or the roundabout. But what we'll do, I'll find the locations, and I'm in my car so that I can get to them quickly. Not that it matters for you, because a 30-minute video, it doesn't matter how long I drive around London, right? Anyway, the Beatles Mad Day Out. Let's find these locations. This is Thompson House, Gray's Inn Road. Now, Thompson House was the headquarters of the Sunday Times newspaper at the time, and the Beatles began their Mad Day Out photo shoot on the top floor. It's obviously changed now because it's been rebuilt. I'll overlay a couple of pictures here so that you can see what it used to look like. I mean, this building here is still 1960s, isn't it? But they decided it would be a good idea to do a photo shoot with a backdrop of the city, so to give kind of like a different setting that was unconventional for the Beatles and would involve their artistic and revolting spirit. That's the wrong word, isn't it? When they go against the grain, go against the system. So yeah, they used the Sunday Times building. Up on the top floor they had a wind machine, and Don McCullin was actually doing a photo shoot for Life magazine, so he was using the studio that had been set up at the top. It was quiet, and they'd come to the Sunday Times building in Gray's Inn Road. At the top of the building was a photo studio that had been created by Tony Snowden. There was no agenda except that they wanted to give Life magazine a cover picture, which I photographed in colour. I used Ektachrome, and Ringo's chrome yellow shirt jumped out of the blue of his suit. I turned on the wind machine. The wind machine was throwing their hair around and their famous faces looked like the figures of Mount Rushmore. To my amazement, it worked and we got a beautiful cover. Looking back on it, Life used to pay 500 quid for a cover, so maybe I actually lost out on that. But I was thrilled. Location number 1, the Sunday Times building, Thompson House. It's just different. What I'll do, I'll overlay some images from that actual shoot while I go ahead and look for the next location.
Like, is that your house?
So the second shoot of the day was here at the Mercury Theatre. Now the theatre was a community hall, but it's no longer standing, although it does say the Mercury at the top here. I don't know, is it still a theatre? It used to be a community hall, but I'm not sure if it's been turned into offices. Here we go. Here stood the Mercury Theatre, 31 to 87, founded by the author and playwright Ashley Dukes. The birthplace of British ballet. But I don't know if they have any awareness that there's a connection with the Beatles. Let's cross the road so that I can get it in the background. Now the lighting on the day posed a problem for Don because they didn't have any natural light. It was all the light inside. And he recalled, we found ourselves in a strange community hall somewhere in the East End. Someone produced a parrot. The light was terrible and I was struggling with reloading my cameras. There was an old upright piano and they started fooling around on it. So during the shoot, someone brought in a parrot, which you can see in the photographs that the lads were fooling around with. And there was an upright piano, which they started playing, you know, Paul started playing random tunes. So they had a good time, they were interacting. So you have to remember that they were in the midst of the turmoil of the White Album and all the hoo-ha that was going on with it. Who chooses these locations? You know, was it a case of someone had actually spied, we'll go to the Mercury Theatre, we could try on some costumes and we can play on a piano. So yeah, lovely little location here in Notting Hill, not far from where William Thacker lives. But I'm not going to take you to where William Thacker lives, that's for another location. Shoot, Notting Hill, right. Now Mal Evans recalled, our next destination was a little place called the Mercury Theatre, which is situated not too far from the headquarters of Beatles Monthly. Good job it was Sunday with all this town travelling to be done. To try crisscrossing London by road on a weekday would have meant spending half the afternoon getting out of traffic. So it was all very random. I can't take you in to show you the location because it's no longer a theatre, right? But I'll leave you with some images, overlaid images of the actual shoot. Looking over my glasses here, try and give you some eye contact. While I go off and find the next location. The third stop on the itinerary was Highgate Cemetery, and there was a reason for this because the Beatles wanted to be photographed next to Karl Marx's grave. But it's £10 to get in, and I'm not so much of a skinflint, but just to do a 30-second video snippet of Karl Marx's grave where the Beatles didn't actually go seems a bit extortionate to me. However, not to waste the trip, there are two locations down, what is this road? I forgot what it's called now. Something's Wells Lane. They stopped off and took a couple of photographs just on the main road. Now, you have to remember that the Beatles are kind of popular. People recognise them, don't they? And so it's just outside 79 that they had some photographs taken. I'm reliably informed that it was 79. If you look at the Beatles Bible website, it says so. But you know what? You can't take everything off the internet, can you? So here's a couple of shots overlaid of that location there, where they sat and took some pictures. So as I was saying, they were popular people. So wherever they went, they would have been recognised. So it didn't take them long to do the shoot and then just get out and do the next one. But just a little further down here is number 59. Now, for no apparent reason, you know, it has no significance in Beatle history other than on a mad day out, they stood here and had their photograph taken. You know, leaning against the wall, Paul with his Liverpool rosette and John shaking hands. I think I can superimpose a picture here, the one off the internet plus my live rendition of the house. What do you think? The Beatles stood here. That was a weird one, that. Highgate Cemetery, they wanted to go there, but it was kind of ditched for whatever reason. So they took 79 and they took 59. Beatle history outside this house. I wonder if the people know. If I got it in the shot. I wonder if the people know, you know, of the connection of maybe the original owners are still in there. I should not. Did you get paid? Did you get compensation? Right, let's go off to the next location. Right, the next location's an easy one for me because I don't have to get out of the car and do any walking. The lads turned up at Old Street Roundabout, which sits above the tube station. Turn that face me. So what I'll do is drive around it a couple of times just to fill you in on the details. Now, this is the roundabout ahead. It's completely changed, as have all the buildings around, and that's what you'd kind of expect, isn't it? Now I'll overlay the pictures. What they did, they fetched a plank of wood and climbed up onto some of the concrete structure, and Don basically said, do whatever you like, just get on with it. And so he then said all the choreography was their own. They planned it. Well, they didn't plan it, it just happened, didn't it? So they were pretending to fight, pretending to lose their balance, and basically just came up with a whole bunch of photographs around Old Street Roundabout. It just has changed completely. It's such a shame. But you know, progress, hashtag progress, right? It used to be a complete roundabout. It looks like I can't go all the way around now. So I'm just going to head to the next location, which is St Pancras Old Church, where some of the most iconic images of the Mad Day Out were taken. Let's go there. Tell you what, driving around is a bit hectic. I'm almost as worn out as I am if I was doing the tube. But we do this for YouTube, don't we? So I'm now at St Pancras Old Church, where some of the most iconic images for the Beatles' Mad Day Out took place. Because you've got the entrance to the church. There's the old, there's the mound here. There is the old mausoleum and the, you know, where the bench was that they were photographed with the drunk. And they were photographed in front of this monument, as well as where the hollyhocks were, with the old hospital in the background there. We've got the mound just here. The lads were pictured at the front of it, but also at an angle here. I think I can superimpose the picture. More or less that's right. It was the mound there. Summer and the trees. Well, actually 28th of July was when it was when the photo shoot took place, right? So we're this close to the church. Let's have a look at the church. I did this in my first Beatles walkabout, I think, or maybe the second one. But let me superimpose the Beatles here. Now, typically what was happening as they were doing each of these photo shoots, where there were people, they were attracting crowds. And St Pancras Old Church was no exception. And in fact, kind of a group of kids and adults all appeared and they were watching the photo shoot. So Don McCullin got them involved and they were all lined up, and he said to the Beatles, go and mingle with the crowd. And he took those he took several iconic images of the Beatles mixed in with the crowd. And so you had little boys and little girls and people, and George was over here somewhere and Paul was over there somewhere. I don't know where they were stood because I can't remember. But the gatefold image, and I'll overlay it here, was used for the centerfold of both the Red album and the Blue album, 62 to 66 and 67 to 70, I want to say. You will correct me in the comments, I'm sure, but it was the Blue album and the Red album, or the Red album because that came first. Yeah, although it's in the heart of the city, it's a really peaceful park. You can see why they would choose it for some random photographs. Now, there was also a requirement to get more photographs for the fan club, so they were incorporating the day of A Mad Day Out, not only to relieve the tension from the recording sessions of the White Album, but actually as a dual purpose. They were trying to get some more candid photographs of the Beatles, not in their normal sort of studio environment, but equally for the fan club. It would become a worldwide phenomenon. Now, this is the coroner's office, obviously where the dead bodies would have been kept prior to being buried. And there is an iconic photograph of the lads sitting next to a drunk. I've just got to get the right angle because from memory there's the circular bit here, and it could have been that there was a bench just here. I would think that the bench would have been down the front of the building here. I don't know for sure, because you had the right hand corner there. Now, it's stated that they assumed that the old boy who was asleep on the bench somewhere behind me was actually drunk. He was intoxicated, and so because of that he was totally unaware that the Beatles were around him, and you had John in the background, you had Paul looming over him, and I think George and Ringo sat next to him. Funny lads. And yet it becomes an iconic photograph, right? Does that look familiar? Careful you don't get wet with them spitting on you. And then they were seated on benches just around this, what would you call this? I want to call it a monument. I also want to call it, what is it? Just a, if we look here, we've got some kind of plantage going on. Are these hollyhocks? Drop me a comment. Still growing after all these years. You could have easily have had the lads here, but I seem to recall that kind of angle with the windows behind them. I almost want to do Beatles, you know, hiding behind the hollyhocks, but that's just being silly. Right, let's just wind this bit up. So the bench in front with the chap sat on it, and I can't ask him to move, has actually got a plaque on it, and I'll superimpose from my last video what it says there. But I have a feeling that the bench was a little further to the right here because of the way it's kind of situated. I'd actually wonder if the bench was completely the other side. So yeah, St Pancras Old Church, location number 6 I think it was on the agenda. Was it 5? I'm losing track now. They will be in sequence on the video, and I'm going to that other location. So as the evening was drawing near to an end, before going to Paul's house, they arrived here at Wapping Pier Head. And more iconic photographs because they had a change of clothing. Fancy kind of latex, not latex, lurex waistcoats and jackets. It's so changed because what we would have had was the Colonial Wharfs building to the left here, and you have the 4 lads standing in the road. I can superimpose it, but it actually it doesn't look as it did in its day. But this scene looks more appropriate because you've got the walkways, which of course were behind the Beatles, but this one doesn't actually, this isn't the right one. So they took a few shots just with the Colonial Wharf behind me. Then they climbed over this fence, because as you can see, it says no public access to the river. But the iconic images where John plays dead and Paul wraps himself in chains all happened here. But because there's no access, I'm going to have to telescope the thing up and point it over the fence. So as you can see, it's a public garden now. How high can I make this go? I want to give you the best aspect. I'm going to walk down one of the walkways in a minute, but because it's private land, I just cannot get onto it. And I'm not a Beatle, so I can't actually trespass, because I'm pretty sure if somebody came out to tell the Beatles off, they would have been delighted to see them. But there is a little public walkway through here. I just saw a little recognition at last. I don't know, maybe he thought I was filming him. It says Thames Path here, so I might be able to get an angle. Private property, please keep out. However, it said Thames Path, so what's the private property? I think this is the private property that we're not allowed into, because that's where they actually filmed it. All their shots were taken. There, it's lapping up. So see the brick wall there? Have I got the camera at the right angle? I think I have. So behind their brick wall, they would have done all their shots. And from that angle, where it was on that wall, you have Tower Bridge in the background. Of course, it's totally redeveloped now with all these new buildings. Can you imagine it? When they were here in '68 and they were filming, they were doing the film shoot, a lot of the buildings were still wrecked, if you like, for want of a better word, from the Blitz. So they were pulling them down, and I think the time of Pier Head with its, you know, the boats coming up and unloading their cargoes, those days were over, weren't they? I'm going to pretend that this is 20 meters just that way, okay? So we can still overlay the odd image with Tower Bridge behind us. Let me get out the way. Not bad. So having then done all the shooting here, I'll give you an overlay of images from that shot, from that shoot, and I'll head off to the final location. Location 7, the final location. So having spent a whole day filming, it was 10 till 10 was the actual kind of timings. And hundreds of photographs later, they turn up back at Paul's house. And now they did a photo shoot just with Paul and the dog, but then eventually all the rest of the Beatles turned up. At the back of the garden, Paul has his geodesic dome, and photographs were taken there. Now I can't go in. A, because I've not been invited, and B, because, well, just B. So I'm going to have to overlay some images here now, so you get the gist of what's going on. They've had a great day, they've taken loads of photographs, and they're basically just chilling at Paul's house. Now Google Maps, it's great if you look at Google Maps, and I'll overlay the image here now. As it rotates round, you can see that the geodesic dome is still in the garden, at least when this Google Earth image was taken. It was 55 years ago from the photo shoot, so it's just amazing, isn't it, that it still stands. Paul's home in London, Cavendish Avenue, the last location for a mad day out. I hope you've had as much fun watching this as I've had making it. It's really bizarre because I thought it would be easy to do it by car rather than take the train and take the tube, you know, let the train take the strain, used to be the advert. But actually the traffic is just horrendous. So what I've done, I did do a tube map at the beginning. This is the tube location map if you wanted to choose to do it and actually stop off at each of the stops. But what I've also done, and I can't remember if I mentioned this at the beginning, I've made a Google Maps, and I'll try and, well, I'll certainly share the link in the description below. But the last time I did a Google's Maps, it was all private, and then people are having to email me and ask for permissions to view it. So I'm going to try and make sure that it's accessible. So there's a link in the description below. If you can't access it but you want to look at the locations, just ping me an email. I think when you're in the map it says request permissions or something. So there you go, a Beatles mad day out. It's been a mad day out. The sun is shining. It said it would be rainy and everything, but that's great. Drop me a comment, I'm sure you will. Correct me where I'm wrong. Don't flame me, just say, oh Chew, I think you got that bit wrong. How about it? You know, I get the information, but then I come here and I go to the locations and I just, oh, I've forgotten what it was, even though I've got my notes. So I'm going to leave you with a few more gallery images from the geodesic dome, and I'll see you in another video. Thanks for watching and bearing with. Bye for now.